Welcome back for another fun colorwork pattern. I've done a couple sweaters at this point, and I am so excited to be doing one with the Valley Yarns. This is by Webb's, the America's Yarn store. I'll be using the Northampton today. This is 100% squishy wool. I love using wool for colorwork. It really helps the color and stitch definition. The colors I'll be using today are a light gray, a natural, an ocean heather, and an autumn heather. I will be labeling these on the charts as A, B, C, and D, so you can substitute the colors as you would like. I also have included in the pattern for download a blank chart for you to color in, just so if you choose different colors, it's easier to visualize the chart when you can pencil in your own colors, and it's easy on the eyes that way, less confusion when you're working from a chart. Today you will also need a crochet hook. I will be using the size H 5mm from Furls Crochet. This is their Streamline edition. This is one of their swirl hooks. You will also need a yarn needle, a stitch marker, of course, especially since we'll be working this continuously and not joining. You'll need a stitch marker to know where the beginning of the round is, and then of course some scissors. And that will be it for learning to do this sweater. The only other thing I don't have on camera, if you have it, it's great, is blocking mats and pins. When we work this yoke, it will be a bit tight, and by doing an aggressive block, it's really helpful. I'll show you that part as we get to it. It's not absolutely necessary. I just like doing a wet block for a really clean look. So let's go ahead and get started with the top of the sweater. We are going to start with our color A, which for me is the Ocean Heather Blue, and we're going to make a slip knot and place it onto our hook. Now what we will be doing for this part is we're going to be making the ribbing, the collar around our neck. So we're going to chain 6. Now this is going to be worked in rows, and I'm going to now single crochet in the second chain from the hook and across. So that will be 5 single crochet stitches across for this first row. And now we're going to turn, chain 1. I like to tighten down that chain quite a bit. And then working in the back loops only, so not both of the loops, but only the back loop, we will single crochet 5 across. And that's a repeat for the ribbing for the neck. This row, row 2, we will repeat again and again until it creates the proper size that you are making. For this sample on camera, I will be making the size small, which means that I will be repeating this for 72 total rows. So I'm simply just going to turn and single crochet in the back loop only for the 5 stitches across, and I will do this until I have 72 total rows. Now if you find that you work your ribbing quite tight, maybe consider loosening your tension or changing your hook size, or if you crochet loose, it's okay to go down a hook size for this ribbing as well. So keep on working that up until you have 72 rows or however many rows for the size that you are working. And then I would definitely try this on around your neck and see how it feels. Now that I have 72 rows for this ribbing, it's smart to try it on around your neck. It should stretch over your head and see how it fits. If you need to add more rows, feel free to do so, because you can simply catch your stitch count correctly when we start working around one side of this. So you really want this to be able to fit over your head, otherwise you're not going to be able to wear this sweater. So now that I have my ribbing completed, it's time to join it. I'm just going to simply fold in my sides together. So I'm going to fold these in. I've got my first row and then my current row, and I'm going to chain 1. And then I'm going to work into the back loop only in my current row, and then grab that first row, and we are going to be working into these loops from the first row. So I'm simply also going to stick my crochet hook under the loop of the first row, and then yarn over and slip stitch all of that together. And then do that all the way across. So insert your hook into the back loop only, then into the loop from the first row, yarn over and slip stitch. Do that for all 5 stitches across to join these edges together. Now that I've joined those edges together, it looks quite nice. Some people like the inside better. It really doesn't matter. Whichever side you want facing out to face out is perfect. And then now we're going to be working around one edge of this ribbing. We can go ahead and weave in that tail end if it's bothering us at this point, because we don't need it anymore, and I will do that in a moment. Now we're going to be working around one side of this ribbing, and I am going to slip stitch one stitch per row all the way around, or just in case you've added stitches, the same count is 72 stitches. So I'm going to slip stitch 72 stitches all the way around the one side of this ribbing. Do not do it too tightly, because you still want it to fit over your head. If you do this ribbing too tightly, then it will cause it to not be able to stretch. And then also throw in a stitch marker on that first slip stitch, because from here on out, we will be working continuously. We are not joining, so you'll want to keep track of the beginning of your round after every single round. So slip stitch 72 stitches around one side of this ribbing, and then come on back. So I've got my ribbing set up here, and we've joined, and we are ready to get right into the color work. We're not playing around with this pattern. We're going right into the color work right on round one. I have one slip stitch left to work, but before I work that, I want to go ahead and talk about the chart. So this is the portion of the chart that we will be working from. It is worked from bottom to top, and each round is worked from right to left of every single round. This will start out with round one, working our very first color, the neutral, and then two in blue. And the next round, we do the same with one stitch in neutral, and then one in blue, and then you see this symbol here. What this means is that we are going to do an increase. Now, all these stitches from the chart will be worked in a split single crochet stitch. We'll talk more about that stitch in a minute, but the increases will also be worked in a split single crochet. You'll just be working two of them whenever you see this symbol into one stitch. And what that does is it increases for our next round. So now we'll be working a stitch repeat of 4 for round 3. Anything that's out here in the white is a no stitch. We need space as we increase our design to add stitches, because we are increasing. So these are just no stitches until they become a stitch when we increase on certain stitches. For this pattern on round 8, this will be the first round where we want to catch our floats on the back. So I'll be working round 8 on camera, as well as round 1 and 2, so you can see that increase. So let's get back to working the first round 1. So back to here where I am on my last slip stitch of the round, but since I want to start working with my neutral right off the bat for the first stitch of the round 1, I want to go ahead and yarn over and complete that slip stitch with my new color. So I've completed the last slip stitch of the round, and I'm ready to start working into this first stitch. So the first stitch of round 1 is done in a neutral. But before I complete this stitch, I want to go back to my blue, yarn over and pull through the 2 loops. And what that does is it gets me set up to work my next stitch in blue and completes the first stitch in the round with that neutral color. We're going to be using our stitch marker quite religiously because we're not joining at the end of each round. So we need to know when we're finished with the round and when we're starting a new one. My next 2 stitches will be in blue. And then I'm going to switch back to my neutral color. So blue is color A and my neutral color is color B. So I'm just going to be working these all the way around. Now, I mentioned we'll be working split single crochets for this pattern, and we will. For the first round, it's just going to be in single crochet stitches because we're not working into the split single crochet until round 2. However, I'm still setting them up so that the next round is easier for me to work. And what I mean by that is when I insert my hook into the stitch and I yarn over and I pull up a loop, I like to pull up that loop a little bit higher, and that makes a larger V on the front, and we'll be working into the center of the V on the next round to make those split single crochets. So I'm making sure that I give myself more room now by pulling up that loop, and that way the next round will be much easier. And notice I'm still working all of these in the back loop only of these slip stitches. I like to do that because it leaves a nice little clean edge here along the front. But if you prefer to work into both loops of that slip stitch, feel free to do that as well. I just love the look of working into the back loop only for this round. So I'm going to complete doing these repeats all the way around and come back for round 2 when we are going to add some increasing. Now after round 1, I am on my last stitch. I don't want to complete it just yet because I want to yarn over with my new color. I know that I'm starting my round 2 with the neutral, my color B, so I'm going to complete that last stitch of round 1 with my color B. Then I'm going to move my stitch marker, and this is where we are going to start working in split single crochets, also known as the waistcoat stitch. So if we look at the anatomy of a stitch on the front here, we see this V. We're going to be working right into the center of that V, and when we do so on the back, we'll be coming out underneath an upside down V on the back. We'll yarn over and pull up a loop, pulling that loop up. If you struggle with split single crochets at all, this is most likely the culprit. You would need to pull this loop up a bit more. Then I'm going to go ahead and go back to my color A, and then work the next one as a split single crochet as well. So all the stitches from here on out are in split single crochet. I'm going to mark the first stitch of this round before I forget. Super important. And then for this next stitch, we're going to be increasing. So we are going to work 2 split single crochets into the stitch from the round below, right into that center of the V. We're just working 2 of those into that one stitch, but we will need to yarn over with our new color, our color B, for this next stitch. I'll work 1 in color B, and then the next in color A. And then the next one will work 2 color A into the same stitch, doing that increase. Now split single crochets shouldn't make your hands cramp. If they are, we are doing something wrong because they should be worked as easy as single crochets. They do, however, take a bit of practice. The reason why is tension. It all comes down to tension, and yarning over and pulling up that second loop is the most critical thing. If you're having a hard time getting into your stitches, most likely it's that loop that you need to pull up just a little bit more. So go ahead and work this round, and I'm actually going to come back for round 3 because I want to talk about working 3 colors at once. I also want to mention before we start round 3 that on the back of this work, you're going to see I'm carrying my yarn. I am not working over my yarn. The yarn that's not being worked is just simply carried on the back. These are called floats. We don't want these to be too tight. We don't want these to mess with our tension or our gauge or our stitches. So it is important to make sure that we're carrying them with a really nice tension. Then when we get to points where we are going to be carrying for more than 3 stitches at a time, we'll talk about how to catch those floats, such as on round 8 when we get there. So now we are ready for round 3, where we are also going to be bringing in a 3rd color. And this is where I want to talk about trying to avoid getting your yarn tangled. So for the first stitch in round 3, I'm going to be working my neutral. We're not going to be increasing on this round. The next round we will be increasing on is round 8. So everything from here till round 8 will not be increasing. Then my second stitch will be with the color A, the blue. I'm going to go ahead and quickly mark that first stitch in the round. And now my next stitch is our 3rd color, which is this beautiful, almost rust autumn heather. And we're going to be working the 3rd stitch in this. So we're going to be working the first stitch from our increases here, and then back to color A. And then we go back to color B. Now something I want you to notice as I'm doing this is wherever I pick my yarn up from is where I place it back to. So if I'm picking up from the far left side for my color A here, I'll drop it back to the left side. The center color will always be picked up, worked, and then dropped, oh, little snag there, and then dropped right back to the center before I pick up my next color. That can help your yarn from getting tangled, as wherever you pick it up from is right where you're going to drop it back to, and that helps. I'm still floating all of these stitches along the back of my work and just working back and forth. Now, color work does take a bit longer than other things in crochet. It's the same for knit, so it is well worth it to have a beautiful sweater and enjoy the process of doing color work. Don't feel like you need to rush every single round. It is fun to see it work up, and I get so excited and I really want to see how it looks, you know, working all these rounds. But don't forget to enjoy the process as you do it. Don't feel rushed. This is not a race. Color work is really meant to be enjoyed along the way, and it is so much fun to watch these patterns work up. So I'm going to keep on working up this until round 8, and then I'll come on back and we'll talk about what to do when we have a yarn that needs to be carried more than 3 stitches. Here I am about to start round 8, and I just want to take a quick moment to talk about how this is shaping up. You may have noticed a few rounds below that it seemed a bit wavy because we had just added a stitch, and the more we have worked, it's laying more flat again. But now we're going to add stitches again. So this won't always lay perfectly flat. It might wave a little bit, and that's okay. We will also be blocking this before we go on to do the body and the arms. Right after the yoke, I like to give it a good blocking, but until then, don't stress if it waves a little bit or is a bit tighter in certain areas. So for round 8, we want to talk about the way that we're going to carry our yarn on the back, because we'll be working in sections where we will have more than 3 stitches of the same color worked at a time, which means on the back, we want to make sure that we catch those floats. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So for round 8, I'm going to start by working the first 2 stitches with the color A, placing my stitch marker in the first stitch in the round. And then I have one stitch in the color B. And then in the next stitch, I go back to the color A, but I'm going to be doing an increase here. So there I've increased a stitch, and then I'll be working a section where this color A will be used for quite some time. So now I know I'm going to be working this until I work my next stitch over here for the color B. So when I insert my hook here, I want to go ahead and take my color B, lay it across my hook, then come back to my color A, and I'm simply going to hold that in place, and I'm going to work this stitch with my color A. And then you notice on the back, I've simply just grabbed it. I've grabbed that float so that it's not too long. If our floats are too long, when we put on the sweater, we might find that it catches in our fingers or on other items. So we want to make sure that our floats stay nice and small, and they're not like too far apart, because that can also start to mess with the gauge. It helps it lay quite nicely, and it helps keep this from doing any tucking or puckering or anything like that. And then my next stitch will be in the color A. And then I'm going to switch back to the color B for one. And so since I'm adding this extra stitch where we're doing the increase, it is like we're carrying across 4 stitches, which we don't really want to do. My maxes pretty much don't carry it more than across 3 on the back. So it's nice just to go ahead and catch that yarn that we're carrying underneath one of the stitches so that it continues to create those nice floats. We'll get a break on the round after this where it's worked in a solid color, but I hope that you're enjoying this color work and watching it work up. It's so rewarding to see how this design shapes up, especially if you're using different colors, because it's really, even though we can kind of imagine some colors, sometimes it's really hard to know exactly how it will look until we work it up. So I am going to leave you to work up the colorwork section entirely. I could keep doing it on camera, but I think it would be quite boring. You have all the skills now to keep on working until we get done with the colorwork rounds for the yoke. Now that I have this yoke sweater done, you'll notice it won't lay exactly flat after you've crocheted it. We're close, but we don't have it quite flat. You do not have to do the aggressive block that I'm going to do. I like doing the aggressive block, but you can also lay this out and just pin it into place, making sure we don't have any puckering up here, laying it flat and let it dry. Or you can do what I'm doing, which is a more aggressive block. I'm going to pull out my blocking mats here, and I'm going to be placing this onto my blocking mats, and I'll show you how I do that. But this is a wet block, so I will go gently soak this in the sink and then wring it out a bit, and then I'll be back. So as you notice, I still have my blue yarn attached here, which I'm going to leave it attached for the blocking, because when we start to work this again after blocking, we'll start right there. It's a bit more flexible now that it is damp. And I like to start at the neckline and block that first. I absolutely love these Knitter Pride blocking pins. I have several sets and I find them really nice to work with. There's 2 different sizes and I do block much faster because it's like I'm pinning 4 or 8 pins at once. So what my favorite way to block these is to start at the neckline. And I like to start by blocking in almost like a grid. So I'm going to go top, bottom, left, right. And then place pins between those, making it a better circle. And now that I have the neck circle done, it's time to expand out from that. Now notice once again, it doesn't completely lay flat yet. It doesn't have to. You can just kind of do it less aggressive, but I'm going to do it pretty aggressive here. It's just the way I like to do it. So I do start doing it again in the, scooch this down a little, in the top and bottom, left and right, and then in between. But you'll notice that it has a twist to it naturally. Especially with crochet, we have that shifting going on. So what blocking helps me do is to bring that shift back to where it needs to be. So I'm just going to follow some of these lines and put them where I like so that they're lining up a bit better, and then block it. And sometimes I'll put in a pin and I'll readjust it later. And now that I have all my pins in place, I usually take a small fan and I just let it move the air across this to dry it faster since it is a wet block. There is just something about these circular yokes that are so fun to post on social media. It's really impressive. I love the way that they look. And it turns out they're not really that difficult to do. If you've gotten to this point, you've really done, I think, the hardest part of this pattern. You can go ahead and shift still just slightly if you want to kind of play with those stitches to get them to line up how you like. And then go ahead and let this dry, and then we'll move on to the next steps. So now we have this beautifully blocked sweater. It's so much fun to take pictures at this point. If you are on social media, please tag me at Brianna K Designs because I absolutely adore seeing these images. You should feel impressed right now. This is really fun color work and you should be impressed with the work you've done so far. And yeah, I kind of want to leave it like this and then put it on a wall for a wall hanging, but we're going to keep on going so that we can wear our art. Now for these next steps, we are going to be changing up the stitch pattern a bit. So we had one more round here of just, I did it in the solid blue. So I just did one round of split single crochet in that solid blue color. And now I'm going to be changing the way that we're working our stitches. So what you will still need is a stitch marker because we're not joining, we're working continuously and we're going to continue to do that. So for this next round, we are going to do a single crochet in the back loop only. Let me zoom in a little bit here. So for this next round, we are going to start this round with a single crochet into the back loop only. And then of course, we're going to go ahead and mark the beginning of the round. And then our next stitch will be the split single crochet like we have been doing. And that's our new stitch pattern. We're just going to keep repeating those 2 stitches all the way around. So single crochet into the back loop only, and then split single crochet, and single crochet into the back loop only, and split single crochet. So for the size small, you will do 3 more rounds like this. And then I want you to try it on. No matter what size you're doing, before you get to splitting for the sleeves, I want you to try it on and make sure that it's long enough, because sometimes it's hard to match gauge both horizontally and vertically, and it's better to get that horizontal gauge versus your rows, get the stitch gauge versus your row gauge, because we can add extra rows. And this is the point where we would be adding extra rows if we needed to in the stitch pattern. Now for some of the sizes, you will be increasing, so I want to show you how to do that. So for some sizes, we just need to add some stitches evenly around, and every single time we do an increase, we're actually increasing by 2 when we use this stitch pattern. So I would then, on a split single crochet, I would split single crochet 3 into 1 stitch. And what that does is it does a nice increase where then when we work back around again, we're still working in our stitch pattern and nothing's getting messed up. So go ahead and work a few more rounds in this fun stitch pattern and then come on back. Now that I have a few more rounds worked for this size small, it's time for us to divide for the arms and the body of this pattern. So we're dividing for the sleeves and the body. At this point, it's a great idea to try it on, see how far it comes down to underneath your arm to make sure that it's going to be a comfortable time to split. If you need to add more rows in the stitch pattern, more rounds, feel free to do so. We just want this to be comfortable, so do not be afraid to customize. Now what we will be doing is, you'll see I have some stitch markers here, and this is the beginning of the round. What I will do is I'll be chaining 8, skipping 40 stitches, and that creates the opening of the arm. And then I will work 56 stitches and then repeat that step. So let's do that. So I will start by chaining 8. And now I'm going to skip 40 stitches, and I've got this marked just so I already know where I'm going. And this, you'll see now, will create the arm. And we're going to continue in that established stitch pattern. So whatever stitch that you're working into next, you'll work it as it is for the round below. So either in a back loop only or a split single crochet. So now I'm going to work to my next stitch marker, which will be working in the established stitch pattern for 56 stitches. So now that I've worked the 56 stitches, it's time to go ahead and chain 8 again. So we're just repeating what we've already done. And now we're going to skip the next 40 stitches, which I've already got those marked. So I can go to my next stitch marker, and this creates the other sleeve. And then I'm going to work the remaining 56 stitches in the stitch pattern. So now that I'm back to the beginning of the round, you can see that we've got these chains. It kind of looks a little bit odd right now, but the chain areas, so over here will be our sleeves on the side, and here down will be our body, which is what we're going to work next. We're going to work down the body, and we'll come back later for the sleeves. So we're going to continue to work in the round. We're just going to be working across these chain stitches. Now the first time we work across these chain stitches, we won't be able to work in the stitch pattern. They're simply going to be worked in single crochet stitches for this first round, and then on the next round we can work them in the established stitch pattern. So I'm moving my stitch marker up to the first stitch of the round, and then I'm going to single crochet across these chain stitches, and then I'll work in pattern for the rest of the round until I get to the next chain stitches, and same thing, single crochet across them. So I'll come back after I do this round and you can see how it's finished. So now that I've done the first body round where we are just single crocheting across those chains, it's time to work the next round with the entire round in the established stitch pattern. So the very first stitch will be in the back loop only, just like we've done before, and then you can go ahead and mark it. And then the next one will be a split single crochet, and we'll just keep working in that pattern all the way around. So now we can work these stitches in pattern underneath the arm, and it looks really nice because they are done in even stitch counts. As you work across here, when you get back to the body portion, you'll be right on track for that established stitch pattern. So I will do a single crochet in the back loop only, which is exactly what I needed to do after those arms. So it'll work out quite nicely all the way around. And now we're just going to be building the body of this sweater. So for the size small, we will be doing a total of 24 body rounds approximately. The color work on the bottom of this sweater is just over 3 inches and the ribbing is 2 inches. So this is where we can adjust the length of the sweater if we want. If we want a crop top, you're going to want to do less rounds. If you want it longer, or even to make it into a sweater dress, you will want to do more rounds. This is also an opportunity to continue to try it on to do any type of shaping that you would want to do. And what I mean by that is if you're going into your waistline, you can single crochet 3 together on the sides to decrease 2 stitches per single crochet 3 together, and you can shape it in, and then you can do 3 single crochets in 1 stitch to once again bring it out. You'll just want to increase and decrease by using either 3 single crochets in 1 stitch or single crocheting 3 stitches together to keep it in that established stitch pattern, so you can keep working it on the following round without running into 2 stitches of the same being right next to each other. So go ahead and work this, and when we come on back, we'll have our body portion, and then we will start to do the color work on the bottom of this sweater. Now that we've worked this portion of our body, it's time for us to do a section of color work on the bottom. Now I want to note, if you do not want to do the color work section for the bottom of this, you can completely omit it and just continue to work 13 more rounds of this body section, or however many repeats you want to do until it hits the length you want on your body. You could do less and make it a crop top. You can do more and make it a dress if you'd like. Before this pattern, I'm writing in to do some more color work design on the bottom of the sweater, which I thought would be kind of fun. So this chart is a bit different where we don't have to increase. It's actually easier. So let's take a quick look at that. So for this chart, once again, it's worked from right to left, from bottom to top, and we are only doing a 4-stitch repeat without any increasing or decreasing. So yay for a bit of easiness. We're going to start by working our color blue, and then we'll do our natural cream, and then 2 more blue, and then that's the repeat all the way around. Now, if you have adjusted sizing a bit in this and you don't have a 4-stitch repeat, go ahead and get a 4-stitch repeat. Either take another round to increase or decrease. The way the pattern's written is in a 4-stitch repeat for the bottom, but if you did some shaping and you're off by a couple of stitches, just quickly add or decrease a couple of stitches so that it is a 4-stitch repeat for this chart. So you know all the tricks to do this. Let's go ahead and work that up the same way we did for the top. This will all be done in split single crochets. So that means that we need to have 1 setup round in order to start working in the split single crochets. So what I will do is I will take the color I'm currently working with, and I'm going to do 1 more round just going around split single crocheting in every stitch. So we're moving away from the stitch design and we're going back to what we had up here with just split single crochets, and we're just going to do that as we did before. So instead of going in the back loop only for the next stitch, I'm going to go ahead and do a split single crochet. And I had my stitch marker there holding my yarn as I moved around the house just so I don't lose those stitches. It holds it so it's not going to unravel. So I'm going to go ahead and do the first stitch as a split single crochet and mark it. And then we're just going to split single crochet into each stitch around. And then for the next round, we will start doing that color work. So now that I've got my solid round of split single crochets, the remaining of this part of this color work will be worked in the split single crochets. So for my very first stitch, I'll start by doing my color blue, and then I'm going to go ahead and bring in this natural for the second stitch. And I'll want to mark the first stitch of each round and work this all the way around. So this is such a simple repeat. Just remember to carry your colors on the back, and if you're going to carry them more than 3 stitches, which you shouldn't have to with this, You want to make sure your floats are sitting quite nicely on the back of this, and just really enjoy this 4-stitch repeat. It's such a joy to work up because it's less thinking than we did on the top where we don't have any increasing. So this is a fun part of this sweater. I'm going to be working these 13 rounds for this color work, and then I'll come on back for that bottom ribbing. Now for round 14 of this bottom colorwork section is just one row, one round worked in our color A in the split single crochet stitch. So now that I've finished that colorwork portion, it's time for us to go on to the bottom ribbing. Now for the bottom ribbing, if you want it to be a bit tighter on the bottom, go ahead and switch to a G hook. However, if you want your bottom ribbing to remain a little bit more loose, not like so fitted to the body, you can go ahead and keep your H hook. So for the ribbing, I'm going to slip stitch into the next stitch just to even out this a bit, and then I'm going to chain 11. Now this last chain is our turning chain, so I like to tighten it down a little bit. And now I'm going to single crochet into each chain across, starting in that second chain. And now that I've single crocheted into each across, which is 10 single crochet stitches, I'm going to slip stitch 2 stitches from the body, starting in that first one. And then we're going to turn our work. So now we're going to be working back down the other side of these stitches. So for this row, we are going to skip the 2 slip stitches, and working in the back loop only, we are going to single crochet until our very last stitch of this row. So we will single crochet 9. Now in the very last stitch of this row, it's best to work through both loops for a bit of a cleaner edge. So you'll work through both loops for the last stitch and the first stitch in each row. And now we are going to turn. And to start this row, we will chain 1 and then single crochet through both loops of that first stitch. And then working in the back loop only, we are going to single crochet the remaining 9 in this row, and then we will slip stitch 2 from the body. And now we have our repeats. So simply turn, skip those 2 slip stitches, single crochet in the back loop only for 9, and then single crochet through both loops for that last stitch. And then turn and just keep going back and forth like so. We're going to be working all the way around the bottom of this sweater, and then when you get back to the beginning, I'll show you how to join this first row with your last row. Now that I've worked this ribbing all the way around the entire bottom of the sweater, it's time to join my current row with my first row. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 1. And then I'm working in the back loop only for all of these here, and I'm going to insert my hook in the back loop only of my first stitch of my current row, and then through the first loop from the very first row in the ribbing, and then I will slip stitch those together. And that's what we will do all the way down this opening until it is closed. So we will simply insert our hook into the back loop only, and then into the loop from the first stitch and slip stitch together. This is a really nice seamless join. It's not noticeable. And then I want to mention, this is the exact same way you will join the ribbing on your sleeve. Even though it's less stitches, this is how it's joined in the same way. And now once you slip stitched all the way around, you can go ahead and fasten off and weave in that end. Now we're ready to go ahead and work this sleeve. So we have this opening here and we need to create a sleeve for it. To get started, we'll grab our color A, our main color, and we're going to attach right underneath the arm. So you're just going to grab one of the stitches from underneath this arm and you're going to attach the yarn. Now I'm leaving a bit of a long tail here because if I have any gaps on the sides where there might be a hole, that's very common, I'll use my tail end to sew those closed later. So I'm leaving a bit of a long tail and I'm tucking it in. Now this is work continuously, so you'll want to go ahead and mark your first stitch of the round. Now we're going to single crochet these stitches from the underarm, simply because we don't have a way to necessarily work them in pattern yet. And since this is worked continuously, you'll definitely want to mark that first stitch where we won't be joining. So what we will be doing is we're going to work in the stitch pattern where we can on top of the sleeve and then work single crochet stitches underneath the sleeve. We will work a total of 48 stitches around. And you'll find when you get to the corners, when you're going from working the undersleeve stitches to then working the top stitches, this is where you might find that you get a hole or a gap. I wouldn't worry too much about it because like I said, we can come in later and we can stitch that together. But if you do want to know a trick, so my next stitch over here is going to be in the back loop only, and if I were to go ahead and work that stitch, it would be quite a bit of a gap, but I can always go and grab some strands from underneath here and almost work it like a decrease. And so I haven't added any stitches, but it really decreases those holes. So now I'm going to continue to work around the top of my sleeve in the established stitch pattern. Now that I'm back around to the beginning and I have 48 stitches all the way around, I can now tell what stitches I need to work these bottom ones underneath the arm in, so I can simply look over here and count my way backwards. So if this stitch is in the split single crochet and then the back loop only, then it would be split single crochet, back loop, split single crochet, and back loop would be the first stitch of this next round. And I'll go ahead and mark that since we're working continuously. And then we'll just keep working in that established stitch pattern. Now, the sleeves will need to be decreased so that we don't work puffy sleeves for this style. So in order to decrease, we will be decreasing by single crocheting 3 together underneath the arm on every 7th round for this size. Now to do this, I'm going to show you what a trick is. I did this other sleeve, is as I'm working down, I tend to mark the rounds I'm decreasing so that I know just to work until I need to decrease on the next 7th round. That way I don't just start from the beginning and try to figure out where I'm at. And you'll also see by keeping these decreases underneath the arm, they're barely noticeable and they have a nice way that they come together. So when I single crochet 3 together, I start by working a split single crochet and then I pick up the strand from the back loop only, and then I work a split single crochet. And then the next round, I just work that as a split single crochet in pattern. So you can see where these decreases were done and they travel down underneath the arm. So let me show you how to do that decrease. So while I'm not actually doing a decrease in this spot, I just am going to show you as an example how to do the decreases. So I'll insert into the split single crochet, pull up a loop, insert to the back loop only and pull up a loop, and then insert into the split single crochet and pull up a loop, and then pull over through all the loops on the hook. And then the next time around, you'll just work into that split single crochet. And that's how you'll be decreasing underneath the arm. And you'll be working this in the established stitch pattern, going around and around, decreasing on every 7th round until you have a stitch count of 36. This will be, you'll want to work it for a total of 44 rounds. The stitch count will be 36, and then you can go on to the color work for the sleeves. Now, once we have this sleeve decreased to the point that we need to, it's time for us to do the colorwork section. Now, the colorwork section on the sleeve is exactly the same as it is on the bottom of the sweater. It's a 4-stitch repeat. It's the same chart. It's the same instructions. So I'm going to let you do that on your own. I'm not going to repeat that on camera. And then after working those 13 rounds of colorwork, we're going to be doing the ribbing in the exact same way. that we did for the bottom of the sweater. We're just using a little bit of different stitch count, which you can also adjust the cuff if you want to be longer or shorter as well. So go ahead and complete those steps, and then you'll just have a second sleeve, and then you're done. Now for the sleeve ribbing, we are going to go down to a G-hook size so that the cuff is nice and fitted onto our wrist. I'm going to move the stitch marker, and to even out these stitches, I like to slip stitch into the next stitch just to kind of even out those rounds. And now I'm ready to work the ribbing. The ribbing is done the exact same way as it is on the bottom of the sweater, only we're using less stitches and a G-hook. So we're going to chain 6, and then single crochet in the second chain from the hook and across. So that will be 5 stitches. And then we're going to slip stitch 2 from the body of the sleeve, this part, and do it exactly the same way as we did on the bottom of the sweater. So I think you're familiar with that at this point. We're just going to slip stitch 2 from the sleeve edge, and then we're going to turn and skip those 2 and single crochet in the back loop only 5 across and keep going back and forth, and that will work up the cuff of our sleeve. You join the exact same way that we did on the bottom ribbing of this sweater, and then you can fasten off and weave in all your ends. Thank you so much for joining me for this really fun Colorwork sweater. I have even more Colorwork sweaters coming, and if you visit my website or my pattern shops, you'll see a variety of color sweaters there as well. It's one of my favorite things to do lately. Please hit that subscribe button and come back for more projects soon.